Make no mistake, what's happening in Gaza is not just the side effects or casualties of war. I mean, this is all very intentional and targeted. Gaza is experiencing catastrophic levels of hunger. Every day, people will die from starvation. That's what that means when you say catastrophic levels of hunger. At Nasser Hospital, the doctors there asked me, can you please smuggle in baby formula for the premature infants in this hospital wing? Can you please do something? And I was packing them in between my scrubs, the clothes that I wear in the hospital, and I was denied entry.
The United Nations has officially declared famine in Gaza. The situation is unspeakable, children are dying, and the world continues to watch. To discuss this and more, I'm being joined by somebody who was in Gaza, who has seen it happen right in front of his eyes, Dr. Thaer Ahmad. He experienced delivering emergency medical care on the front lines in Gaza and in Lebanon, and now he joins me from Chicago. Dr. Ahmad, thank you so much for joining us here. Let's begin with what is happening in Gaza and your first-hand experience.
Yeah, I mean, what's happening in Gaza is an absolute catastrophe that's being implemented by a very advanced and sophisticated military. Make no mistake, what's happening in Gaza is not just the side effects or casualties of war. I mean, this is all very intentional and targeted. And so let's take a few examples very briefly to talk about what's going on. As a medical physician, as a global health expert, as somebody who's involved in emergency response and has worked in different parts of the world, I've never seen hospitals and healthcare workers be targeted. I've never seen them lose the protections that they are insured under international humanitarian law. But that's exactly what we've seen in Gaza over the last 22 months. That's what I personally felt when I was at Nasser Hospital, the hospital that was struck yet again today, right now as we speak, hit by multiple Israeli missiles, killing the journalists and the first responders that were there. And this is something that we've seen. It's a trend. This is not a mistake. This is not an accident. This is not just something that can happen in war. This is a deliberate effort to dismantle and collapse the healthcare system in Gaza. And that's why you've seen out of the 36 hospitals that once stood in Gaza, 18 of them are no longer functioning. And the other 18 are merely partially functioning. And what does that mean? That means the services that you would normally provide to save people's lives, to cure their illness, to heal their sicknesses, and to treat their wounds are not readily available for anybody that's walking through their doors. They're partially available, meaning that the people will suffer consequences and outcomes as a result of this. So that's just the healthcare system. What about food security? What about the ability for families to make sure that they have food on the table so that children and babies can have the nutrients that they need to be able to survive, to grow, and to thrive? That is being deliberately obstructed and withheld by the Israeli military in a way that even as last week, the IPC report, which is a report that's published about hunger and starvation, said that Gaza is experiencing catastrophic levels of hunger. Every day, people will die from starvation. That's what that means when you say catastrophic levels of hunger. It means that families will go 24 hours without any sort of food whatsoever. It means adults will skip meals to provide their children with whatever they can find. And that our children in Gaza are not being exposed to all of the food groups that are needed for them to be able to develop normally, for them to be able to grow, to have strong immune systems, and to live full lives. And then what about water? I mean, we talk about water infrastructure being totally damaged and destroyed, the inability to be able to desalinate the salt water from the sea, the inability to filter the water that exists so that it's fit for human consumption, the lack of wells being accessed and being destroyed. And I haven't even begun to talk about this new invasion of Gaza City, this new Israeli military offensive that's going to affect 500,000 people who are dealing with all of the things that I just mentioned. We're talking about ground troops, tanks, fighter jets, and drones absolutely decimating Gaza City. And so everything that you're seeing is a very deliberate and calculated effort to make sure life cannot be sustained in Gaza.
Thaer, you have been to Gaza, you've served there, you're in touch with doctors who are serving there or intend to go there. what are the experiences? What are they telling you? What have you seen? And do you also intend to go back? Should you be
Of
allowed?
course. Of course, I've been going to Gaza since 2009, so I'm very familiar with all of Palestine and specifically with the healthcare system in Gaza. And I have friends who I speak to who are my colleagues who work in these hospitals quite regularly. I've been turned away from entering Gaza four consecutive times, and this is something that many healthcare workers who are trying to go and stand in solidarity with their Palestinian colleagues on the ground are experiencing. More than half of us, specialists from all over the world, internationals, are being prevented from entering by the Israelis. The Israelis are not giving us the permits to enter Gaza. And what they're telling me is that they feel that there is a double standard from the rest of the world. Why is it when it comes to Palestine and it comes to Palestinians in Gaza that they are not afforded the same protections under international humanitarian law? How come doctors and nurses and first responders in Gaza cannot get the equipment that they need to save the lives of the patients that are in front of them? How come they're being prevented?
Because Thaer, they themselves are not safe.
Exactly.
Doctors today in Gaza are not safe. Hospitals are being attacked. I'll let you continue, but let me just give you the argument that Israel gives. They say they're attacking hospitals because Hamas and Hamas commanders and Hamas fighters use hospitals as a shield. That's their argument.
You know, these hospitals are being used to try to save Palestinian lives. That's what's happening in these hospitals. I was in these hospitals. I've been going to these hospitals for 15 years. Right now, in these hospitals, you'll see displaced families. You'll see them in the hallways of these hospitals. Right now, in these hospitals, you'll see blood-soaked floors. You'll see overcrowded departments and wings and surgical departments. You'll see people who are suffering and crying from hunger. You'll see children who've lost limbs, who are sitting there hoping that one day they'll have a prosthetic so that they can walk again. You'll see people like Dunya Abu Muhsin, who was staying at Nasser Hospital, who had lost her entire family and lost her leg, who was recovering at Nasser Hospital only to see a tank shell from an Israeli tank fired through the window of her room to kill her 2 weeks after her family was killed when their house was bombed. That's what you're seeing in these hospitals. And I think it's important for us to start listening to the Palestinians who are on the ground because for 22 months they have warned us and told us about what was happening. And every single time we've dug into it and we've questioned it and we've tried to verify it, we have found that they have been telling nothing but the truth and that they are giving us an accurate picture of what's happening. So I personally do not care what anybody else has to say because these are the only trustworthy sources that I want to hear out. They are the ones who are interested in saving lives. They have no political motives and they have no other agendas. And so these are the people that we should be listening to. And as you mentioned, there have been more than 1,000 healthcare workers in Gaza that have been killed, more than 200 that are abducted and languishing away in Israeli prisons. We just saw what happened to first responders at Nasser Hospital, and we saw what happened to the Palestinian Red Crescent people who were responding in Rafah. The New York Times published a video of them being gunned down by the Israeli military. Why should I or anybody else listen to what anybody has to say about Palestine and Gaza? Sources on the ground who are living this day in and day out, who have to breathe in the fumes from the smoke of the bombs that are being dropped on them. I don't care what anybody else has to say because I found that I can trust the Palestinian healthcare workers and the public health experts on the ground. I've seen it with my own eyes. It's been verified by every single international agency and human rights organizations. So that's who we should be listening to.
We're seeing videos and photographs and painful footage come out of Gaza day in and day out there. Why isn't the world moved? Some of us are carrying the stories unrelentlessly, following the stories. But why isn't the world moved by what is happening in Gaza?
It's an incredible question that I ask myself every single time when I lay down and I'm sitting and feeling defeated and hopeless about what's happening in Gaza, not understanding why we could let 22 months of this persist, that the death toll continues to climb and it's new emergency after emergency, whether it's polio or it's this mercenaries trying to deliver food and gun down Palestinians at the same time, the GHF, or it's Nasser Hospital being bombed, or it's Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya in a prison. And I realize it's something that Palestinians have learned for a very long time. It's the effect of dehumanization. This is an effort and a campaign that has persisted against Palestinians for decades, long before October 7th. It's an effort to make the entire world believe that Palestinians are lesser than, that they are not as human as you, that they do not love their children as much as the rest of the world love their children, that they do not celebrate when people graduate or people get married, and that they love the idea of death. This is why I feel that the double standard exists. When you compare the outrage and the mobilization of different resources and groups fighting against what's going on in Ukraine to what's happening in Gaza, it's remarkable. What conclusion can you come to other than Palestinians are dehumanized? Palestinians are discriminated against because that is the sort of effort that's been at play here. When you think of an image of a Palestinian, you don't see a loving father who's desperate to feed his family. You don't think about the mother who sits there and prays for her children day and night that they can graduate and they can get married and that she can see grandchildren one day. You don't see the doctor, Thabat Salim, as she is returning home from the neonatal unit after a long day of work helping the babies of Gaza to her tent, only to have her tent bombed. You don't think about her story. You don't think about the nurses that we've lost or the doctors. You don't think about the engineers. Instead, we view them with one wide paintbrush, simply as these people. I mean, my own president, President Trump, when he talked about the famine and the starvation, while acknowledging that was taking place, was simply just referring, we have to feed them, we have to feed them. Well, I ask you this question, and I want people to think about this. If your father was starving to death, or your daughter, or a family member, or somebody you loved was starving to death, would you be okay with a quick, we got to find a way to feed them? Or would you not want to probe deeper and further? How did this happen in the first place? Did somebody do this to them? What do they need? How can I help them recover? How can I help them thrive? So you have to look at how Palestinians are characterized and the words that are used. And I think that's the essence of all of this. And the last thing I'll say about that too is that translates into lack of political will. I mean, we see this at the UN Security Council. I see this in my country with the decisions that our policymakers make. There is no political will to do the right thing in Gaza, to have moral consistency, to have a principled approach, to uphold international humanitarian law. That's all lacking because the politics are clouding everything and are forcing us to make the wrong decision. And we will look back at these moments and we will say that the lack of moral clarity and courage is something that we will be ashamed of. I mean, myself, I'm ashamed of my lack of progress and ability to make a difference for my Palestinian colleagues, given the privilege that I have. How about people in these positions of power? People who are raising their hand to veto resolutions at the UN Security Council. People like our Secretary Marco Rubio, who's suspending humanitarian visas for children in Gaza that need medical evacuation. He suspended it last week. I mean, this is a lack of political will because Palestinians have been dehumanized and we just don't view them as human.
I'll talk about your friends who's serving in Gaza and the experiences thereof. But let me just come back to what you just mentioned. And it's an incredible statement. You're talking about lack of political will. I'd like to probe further. Is it lack of political will, Thaer, or is it the active will to now liken any protest against what's happening in Palestine to being anti-Semitic? That there's a political will to set a narrative rather than the lack of political will here?
Well, I mean, I think that's an interesting question, but we'd have to look back prior to this current escalation, this current aggression on Gaza. Before that, what we saw was there was an unwillingness to even hear a Palestinian narrative or perspective. And so I think it all fits in. I think, yeah, I mean, I think there is something to be said about there is a very strong political imperative to at least not just demonize Palestinians, but to support what's happening against them, to support the Israelis in any efforts against Palestinians. And so long before October 7th, the rhetoric surrounding Palestinians by lawmakers in the US, in Europe, in the UK was always to back up the Israeli narrative. I do agree with that. But I also think that most people are watching what's unfolding in Gaza now and that they can no longer say they weren't aware. I feel like every single person in power, whether it's David Lammy, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Ursula, Macron, Merz, whoever it is well aware of what's happening in Gaza and is well aware of how Israel is prosecuting this war. There is no, feigned ignorance that can exist. And that's where I see the lack of political will. That's where I see the lack of courage. And I think it's do not deviate from the Israeli narrative. Yes, I think that pressure is there and that there's an effort, but also you now know what's happening. You know about a man-made famine. You know about a healthcare system that's been attacked. You know about what is being referred to as a genocide and ethnic cleansing, so on and so forth. And that's where I see the lack of political will and courage. I mean, at least from my perspective, in being in these meetings with lawmakers, with politicians, with elected officials across the board, Europe, UK, United States, Global South. And what I see is a lack of courage. I see an acknowledgement of what I'm saying. I don't see any sort of argument against it, and I don't see the prevailing Israeli narrative. But what I see is excuses as to why they're not able to act.
Okay, here's a little difficult one for you, Thaer, because you have friends who are still serving in Gaza. Do you get calls from friends, from doctors, seeking help, asking you if you can do anything about evacuating them, their family members, children, just children they know who are absolutely ailing?
Yeah, I mean, it's
And how
something that
difficult is it?
it's excruciating. It's devastating. And it's soul crushing because you're talking to people who, for no other reason than being Palestinians who happen to be born in Gaza, are being annihilated. And I talk to them all the time, and it's everything. It's a question. Sometimes it's questioning: is there anything that can be brought in? As simple as is there any way that you're able to bring in batteries? Are you able to bring in a stethoscope, alcohol pads? My phone screen broke. Is there any way that you can help me with that? Can we get an ultrasound machine because of the pregnant women? Can you help me evacuate my sick relative who's been in a hospital bed for months? Can my family have a chance? I'm gonna stay back as a doctor. Can my family though be evacuated somewhere? It's all of the requests that you can imagine, given the images that we're seeing coming out of Gaza. I mean, what would you do if your family was in a similar position, if your family was in Jabalya or was in Khan Yunis or was in Rafah? What would you do as you see this very advanced military with endless tanks and fighter jets that fill the skies? What would you do? Of course, you would turn to people who you have befriended or who you know and see if there's anything that you can do to help them. And unfortunately, I mean, for 22 months, my responses have been of total failure. Nothing that I can do. I can't even bring in a carton of cigarettes for somebody to smoke just so that they can have some sort of relief. I mean, I cannot even bring in baby formula. The last time I was rejected, June 19th, at Nasser Hospital, the doctors there asked me, can you please smuggle in baby formula for the premature infants in this hospital wing? Can you please do something? And I was packing them in between my scrubs, the clothes that I wear in the hospital, and I was denied entry. So that baby formula stayed with me in my bag in Jordan, and I had to go back to the United States. I mean, this is it's agony for somebody who has been on the ground and who has met these people and knows who they are, knows their character. And I have run out of words to say to them, to be honest with you. I'm embarrassed. I mean, I'm just sending them a message on WhatsApp to see if there's a double check mark, hoping that they have received the message and that they weren't injured in an airstrike the night before. They weren't killed. That's what we've been reduced to, our communications with each other. And, I don't know what to say to them anymore. Sorry, are you still alive? Are you hungry? What can I do about any of that? Nothing. And so it's really a miserable situation to be in. And I'm sure many people can sort of understand that. They can understand that, just that desperate moment that we're in.
I understand that too, Thaer, because I have friends who are journalists in Gaza, and I message them just saying, I don't know what to say, you're just in my prayers. That's all.
Yeah, I mean,
there's nothing. You cannot say anything. You cannot ask them, how are you? How do you ask them, how are you? How do you ask them, are you doing well? Are you okay?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, I think one thing that's bothered me and that I've tried to do to at least have some sort of progress or momentum, because our ability to respond, our ability to help is so limited, is I've tried to highlight they are beyond numbers. That's something I've heard from my friends in Gaza across the board is, we're viewed as numbers, statistics. Not even our names are being recalled. And so I've really tried to communicate their stories. I've tried to tell people who they are so that people get a sense and they feel that connection that we have because we talk to people on the ground. I mean, I never met Anas Sharif, the Al Jazeera journalist that was killed right outside of Shifa Hospital recently. I never met him, but I was intimately aware of who he was. I saw him every day on our TVs in Arabic talking about what was happening in Gaza. And what bothers me is people, heard that a journalist was killed and that the entire Al Jazeera Gaza City crew was killed in that airstrike.
But they're all
But I want to
labeled
tell people
Hamas
that he was a father.
terrorists. They're all labeled Hamas terrorists. Journalists are
Yes.
labeled Hamas terrorists.
And you know what? Anas, let me tell you who Anas was, because I'm not going to allow that to be the line in his obituary. Anas is a 28-year-old who's never left Gaza before. He's been there his entire life. He's a father of two, Sham and Salah. Sham is not even 4 years old yet. She's as old as my oldest daughter. His father died in the beginning of this war. His father was killed in an airstrike. Anas was somebody who had lost his home. He's somebody who's married, and his wife saw him on live TV break down during the starvation. She saw her husband break down because he was hungry, he was starving, and he was watching his community collapse looking for food. And so his last month of life is, I think, a testament to the failures of the entire world. He was calling on X for people to come and do something, that he is being actively threatened by this military, that they are going after him. He's asking for protections, and we failed him. And so rather than us sort of just allow this to be a mere incident in what's happened in Gaza, we should say his name and say what happened and talk about his kids and say that we failed him and we can't fail the next person. And today, 4 more journalists were killed at Nasser Hospital, 4 of them. And all of them are writing their wills. This is remarkable to me that we have 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds who have accepted their fate, that they will be targeted and they will be killed because they're either ambulance drivers or they're journalists or they're doctors or nurses. And they're writing wills that are published. I mean, this is absurd. It's absurd. And so I would caution people to not just sort of accept the whimsical things that are being said and to think about who they are and to dive deeper. Anas is one example of over 200 and probably 50 journalists now that have been killed. And I talked about the 1,000 healthcare workers. Their stories need to be told. We need to remember them. We need to honor their memories. And the
Or
best way
these
to honor,
16,000 children, Thaer.
yes, and to me, the best way to honor their memories is to fight that this doesn't happen again and to hold the people responsible, get some sort of accountability. And that's what I believe. I mean, 16,000 children are just the ones who have been killed. We're not even talking about how many have been orphaned, how many have lost limbs, how many have disappeared. And so, this is the scale of this disaster. It's time for us to move past the weekly headlines and dig deeper and to look into this and realize that Gaza and Palestine is just the beginning. Tomorrow, it's wherever you are in the world. You could come to you next if there's no accountability, if there is nobody being held responsible, if there is no movement of people saying, whoa, children, that's a red line. Journalists, that's a red line. Doctors, that's a red line. How many red lines have been crossed? Do you think that this will begin and end with Palestine and Palestinians? Absolutely not. This is an existential crisis, a threatening crisis for the entire world, for all people. Because when tomorrow another group of people are being vilified, they will look at what happened in Gaza and that will happen to them. That will be carried out. Why? Because it was done with impunity. It was done without the acknowledgement or the recognizing the preciousness of life, not valuing it just because the word life was preceded by the word Palestinian. And so that's what I worry about. I mean, I'm sure you saw this, but did you see the graduation in Gaza for the orphans about a week ago? It was miserable to watch. It was the most devastating graduation with the most beautiful children that you could see. All of them lost their parents. They're wearing their cap and their gown. All of them are in a primary school, walking there, looking into the crowd and realizing their parents aren't there for this moment. And this will be one of, hopefully, if they survive this, many moments where they will not see their parents or their relatives be able to celebrate with them. I mean, it was absolutely soul crushing to watch that take place. Devastating. And so, I think that's a point where you have to look at those kids and see them for who they are. I mean, they're just kids. And there is no reason, there is no premise, there's nothing that you could say to justify the pain and the suffering that's being inflicted on the people of Palestine. And I'm at a point now where I think people need to, I hope that I can ask people just to just wake up and realize what's happening here. It is not a land that's far, far away. It is not something that will never happen to you.
Your final word, Thaer. You spoke at the United Nations, and you in a very strong statement, were asking for accountability and the fact that time is running out. Has time not already run out? And what do you have to say to the world leaders?
Yeah, I think the world leaders have absolutely failed, and they failed at multiple moments in time. I mean, we have seen catastrophe after catastrophe unfold in Gaza. And Gaza is a land now where human rights, humanitarian law, where everything has come and died. It's been buried very, very deep. And what I would say is that this is not going to be a moment that you can just wait for its current event status to fade away. This is going to be a moment that forever lives with us, and we will always look back and remember who stood on what side and who could have done something and didn't do anything. And it's not too late to step up now and do the right thing. Yes, it would have been nice to have happened a month ago or a year ago. But just because people did not act previously doesn't mean they shouldn't act right now. We are talking about people who are actively suffering, who are actively struggling. And I would just call on all of the people of the world and the world leaders to look at Palestinians and see themselves in them, see their children, see their parents in them, and do something. I mean, do something. Talk about them. Say something. Give some money to an organization. Stand up and talk to a local leader. We have a chance right now to be able to save lives. So many have been lost. So many have perished. So many have been attacked. Why not do something right now? And I promise you that this is something that people like myself and all the communities that have stood up and spoken up and given a coverage to this, we're not going to let anybody rest who did not stand up and do the right thing. We will hold people accountable if we have to. If our international structures fail, if these sort of systems that we built after World War II do not rise to the occasion, we will have to be the ones who will hold people accountable. And we will make sure that every single person that stood by or stood silent and did not do what they could to prevent this genocide from deepening and getting even worse, that we're going to remind you every day for the rest of your life.
We will indeed hold them accountable. Dr. Thaer Ahmad, thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you. I appreciate you.